Imagine you are a major tech company. You've got billions of dollars, and you want to build the ultimate AI cluster. You order 10,000 advanced GPUs. The chips actually arrive in a matter of weeks. You're ecstatic, ready to train the next model that will change humanity.
But then comes the day of reckoning. You go to plug them in, and you realize something terrifying. A modern AI cluster doesn't run on standard wall outlets. You need hundreds of megawatts of continuous, unfailing power. So, you call the local utility to get hooked up to the grid, and they have very bad news.
They tell you that the local grid doesn't have the capacity. You're going to have to wait. And that massive high-voltage transformer, you need to step down the power from the main lines. The lead time on that is 4 years. 4 years!
Think of that mismatch. In the digital world, everything moves at light speed. You can buy the most sophisticated supercomputers in a month, but you cannot buy the electricity to run them. That is the physical reality crashing into the software dream.
Exactly. Today, we're looking at the deepest, slowest to expand bottleneck in the entire AI build-out. Physical power, the grid, and the raw materials that hold it all together. It is the ultimate limit.
Quick, honest note before we dig in. This is just two curious people thinking out loud, for learning and for fun. It's not investment advice and never a buy or sell call. So always do your own homework.
Welcome back to Follow the AI Money on the Working Thesis. I'm Theo.
And I'm Maya. We are thrilled to have you here for episode 3. If you're just joining us, let's recap. We use the bottleneck lens, the idea that the real value in a gold rush flows to the owners of the scarcest, most non-substitutable inputs, rather than the software layer.
In episode 2, we took a deep dive into high bandwidth memory, or HBM, which is the binding bottleneck today. But today, we are shifting our gaze to what our framework identifies as the most durable bottleneck in the entire ecosystem: physical power and raw materials.
Right, because while HBM yields will improve and new chip fabs will be built in the next couple of years, the power grid exists on an entirely different evolutionary timeline. Software is optimized in seconds. Silicon fabs take a couple of years. But electrical grids and the physical mines that feed them are measured in half-decades and decades.
This is the most durable rung on the duration ladder. It is where digital ambition meets the hard, unyielding constraints of physics, heavy industry, and geology. Let's look at the demand wall.
The sheer scale of the electricity demand heading our way is staggering. If we look at the consensus data from groups like the Electric Power Research Institute, or EPRI, and the Department of Energy, we are running headfirst into a demand wall.
In the U.S. alone, data center power load is projected to hit approximately 134 gigawatts by 2030, nearly tripling today's levels. We're talking about data centers going from gobbling up around 4% to 5% of all U.S. electricity to a staggering 9% to 17% of the entire country's electrical generation by 2030.
Globally, the International Energy Agency, or IEA, estimates that data center electricity consumption will roughly double by 2030. We are building massive, centralized AI campuses that draw between 1 and 2 gigawatts of electricity each. 1 gigawatt is enough to power a mid-sized city or the entire output of a utility-scale nuclear reactor.
But our grid was never built for this kind of localized, hyper-dense load growth. According to the DOE and academic research, the average wait time in U.S. interconnection queues is now roughly 7 years. You can build a data center building in a year, but you might wait 7 years just to get permission to hook it up.
It's a complete mismatch. In fact, consensus industry reviews show that about half of all planned data centers in the United States are currently delayed or at risk, specifically due to these grid constraints. There is a massive, historic gap between announced megawatts and actual energized megawatts.
This isn't just some hypothetical theory. If you want hard, objective proof that power is a severe bottleneck, you don't look at the tech company press releases. You look at the order books of the heavy industrial equipment manufacturers. This is where our framework talks about moving from the AI CAPEX beneficiary to the AI capacity permit.
That's a great phrase. The capacity permit means that whoever can physically deliver the electrical infrastructure holds the actual permission slip to build AI. And when you look at the backlogs of these industrial giants, Their order books are absolutely exploding.
Let's look at some public examples. Take GE Vernova. In their Q1 2026 reports, their backlog for heavy-duty gas turbines hit approximately 100 gigawatts, up from about 83 gigawatts at the end of 2025. Their delivery slots are completely booked out into 2029 and 2030, and turbine prices are climbing 10% to 20% year over year. Data centers now represent about 20% of their new turbine sales, compared to just 10% a year earlier.
And it's the exact same story in Europe with Siemens Energy. Their total backlog recently reached a massive 136 billion euros, which is about 145 billion US dollars. Their order book is booked solid into 2029, and customers are facing wait times of 5 years or more. It has gotten so tight that some desperate buyers are searching the secondary market for used turbines.
What about the grid connection? GE Vernova's electrification backlog, which includes massive transformers and high-voltage switchgear, exploded to approximately $42 billion, up from a baseline of just $9 billion at the end of 2022. Their data center electrification orders in the first quarter of 2026 alone surpassed their orders for the entire year of 2025.
Meanwhile, major equipment providers like Eaton and Schneider Electric are reporting delivery lead times of 18 to 36 months for basic industrial electrical gear. To summarize, heavy-duty gas turbines take 3 to 7 years to deliver. Large power transformers over 500 kilovolts take 2 to 4 years, and high-voltage switchgear takes 1 to 2 years. Money simply cannot buy speed here.
Let's double-click on that transformer bottleneck, because it is the ultimate example of why physics and metallurgy, not money, set the pace. Pre-COVID, a large utility-scale transformer took about 6 to 12 months to order. Today, that lead time is 2 to 4 years, and prices have spiked by over 300% in many cases.
It's incredible. And when you ask why manufacturers can't just run their factories faster, you hit the deepest layer of the supply chain: raw materials. Specifically, grain-oriented electrical steel, or GOES, and copper windings.
GOES is a highly specialized steel alloy. Because of its unique crystal structure, it minimizes energy loss from magnetic fields, making it non-substitutable for high-efficiency transformer cores. And production of GOES is incredibly concentrated among a handful of global producers, like Nippon Steel in Japan and POSCO in South Korea. The United States produces almost none of it domestically.
So you can't just build a new transformer assembly line and solve the problem. If you don't have the specialized steel for the core, you can't build the transformer. Building a new transformer plant takes 3 to 5 years, and building a new GOES mill takes even longer and requires upwards of $1 billion in capital.
That is why the servers in weeks, transformer in 4 years comparison is so powerful. Software companies are running at digital speed, but they are entirely dependent on a slow-moving, capital-intensive metallurgy supply chain that cannot be rushed. Physics and metallurgy, not money, set the pace.
So, what happens when a hyperscaler wants to build an AI cluster, but the utility company tells them they have to wait 7 years to connect to the public grid? They bypass the public grid entirely and go behind the meter.
This generation scramble is fascinating. Tech giants are essentially becoming independent power utilities, building or contracting dedicated power generation right next to their server campuses.
In the near term, natural gas turbines are the default workhorse. They are projected to make up about 40% of new data center power additions by late 2026. Why? Because they are fast to deploy, highly reliable, provide firm 24/7 power, and modern models from GE Vernova and Siemens Energy are increasingly hydrogen-ready.
But the holy grail for these tech companies is clean, carbon-free baseload energy. They have strict net-zero carbon goals, which has triggered an unprecedented renaissance in nuclear energy. In fact, tech industry nuclear power purchase agreements, or PPAs, have now surpassed a cumulative 47 gigawatts.
We are seeing massive, historic public deals. Look at Microsoft partnering with Constellation to restart a retired unit at 3 Mile Island, the Crane Clean Energy Center. Look at Amazon's deal with Talon Energy to buy power directly from Susquehanna, and their partnerships with SMR developers like X Energy. Or Google signing an agreement with Kairos Power to bring 500 megawatts of SMRs online by 2030, and Meta working with the Clinton nuclear station for over a gigawatt of capacity.
Independent power producers and utilities like Constellation, the dominant U.S. nuclear operator, and Vistra, which operates massive nuclear and gas assets in Texas and Illinois, have become strategic gatekeepers. And fuel cell companies like Bloom Energy partnering with Brookfield are deploying rapid, grid-independent fuel cell installations. It is a gold rush for megawatts.
But as students of the bottleneck lens, we always ask, what is the bottleneck behind the bottleneck? If nuclear power is the ultimate destination for clean, 24/7 AI power, what is the constraint on nuclear?
It's the fuel, uranium.
Exactly. The uranium market is currently experiencing a massive structural deficit. In 2026, global reactor demand is projected to be around 190 million pounds of U3O8, while actual global mine supply is lagging at only about 135 million pounds. Even when you factor in secondary supply, total supply is only around 180 million pounds.
That structural gap is real, and it is widening as utilities extend the lifespans of existing reactors and tech companies push for new, small modular reactors. To make matters tighter, approximately 70% of global uranium requirements post-2027 are currently uncontracted. This has sparked a scramble, driving spot prices into the $80 to $100 per pound range, with long-term contracts approaching $100.
Western uranium supply is concentrated among just a few large producers. Cameco, for example, holds long-dated contracts extending out toward 2035.
And for SMRs, there's an even tighter sub-bottleneck: high-assay, low-enriched uranium, or HALEU. SMRs need this fuel to operate, but Western enrichment and conversion capacity is years away from being able to supply it at scale. So, once again, the software dream is downstream of nuclear fuel cycles.
This brings us directly to the raw metals. To quote the executives at Freeport-McMoRan, AI is ultimately downstream of mining. You cannot build a digital world without digging massive holes in the ground.
Let's talk about copper, because it is the literal central nervous system of electrical infrastructure. AI data centers are incredibly copper-intensive, far more so than legacy data centers, due to dense power distribution networks, massive bus bars, and generator windings. A single, large-scale hyperscale facility can require up to 50,000 tons of copper.
By 2030, consensus estimates project that AI data center demand alone could add an extra million metric tons of copper demand per year.
And the copper market is already facing a severe structural deficit. Goldman Sachs and S&P Global have flagged refined copper deficits starting in the 2025 to 2026 window, with annual supply gaps of 500,000 to 1 million tons later this decade. Freeport-McMoRan and S&P warn that by 2030, we could see a massive 6 to 8 million metric ton annual supply gap if new mines aren't brought online.
But a new copper mine takes 10 plus years to permit, fund, and construct. On top of that, over 40% of the world's copper supply is located in Latin America, exposing it to risks of resource nationalism and water scarcity.
And we can't forget specialty metals. Gallium, essential for high-performance power electronics, has supply heavily concentrated in China, making it highly vulnerable to export controls.
Or rare earth elements like neodymium, dysprosium, and praseodymium, which are essential for permanent magnets inside cooling fans. Over 90% of rare earth refining happens in China. This is a choke point of processing and geography, but a single export restriction can freeze supply chains instantly.
When you look at our entire bottleneck framework, across semiconductor designs, high-bandwidth memory, networking, and liquid cooling, why do we rank physical power and raw materials as the absolute number one on our duration ladder?
It comes down to the sheer difficulty of expanding supply. If TSMC needs to build a new semiconductor fab, they can do it in 2 to 3 years with enough capital. If NVIDIA needs to design a new chip, they can do it in 12 months. But you cannot use software to speed up the licensing of a copper mine. You cannot use venture capital to make a steel mill cast electrical steel any faster. The laws of physics, geology, and environmental permitting cannot be disrupted by code.
That gives this bottleneck the longest runway and the absolute lowest fragility. If you buy a semiconductor company, you are taking a risk that a competitor might design a better chip next year and make your investment obsolete. But a transformer, a megawatt of electricity, or a pound of copper doesn't care which AI model wins.
Exactly. It is completely realization agnostic. It doesn't matter if OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, or some startup wins the LLM race. Every single scenario requires massive amounts of copper, electrical steel, gas turbines, and uranium. The physical foundation captures the value, regardless of the software outcome.
But we pride ourselves on being objective and humble here. We aren't here to just paint a rosy picture. We have to pressure test this thesis. And there are some highly critical caveats that any observer needs to respect.
Yes, we have to stay grounded. First of all, the entire power and materials bottleneck is a derivative of the primary AI capital expenditure trend we analyzed in episode 1. If tech giants decide to scale back their AI infrastructure spending because they aren't seeing the software revenues they expected, those aggressive 2030 power demand forecasts will be slashed overnight.
Second, we shouldn't underestimate the power of efficiency gains and local innovation. If AI chips become dramatically more energy efficient, or if data centers transition to advanced liquid cooling that lowers their power usage, the projected strain on the public utility grid could ease faster than the consensus expects.
And finally, we have to remember that gas turbines, copper, and uranium are cyclical commodities and industrial equipment. They have a long, well-documented history of violent boom and bust cycles. Backlogs can be canceled, capital projects can be deferred, and today's structural shortage can easily become tomorrow's oversupply if the macro cycle turns. Scarcity is real, but volatility is a permanent feature.
Let's run our 3-question bottleneck screen on this entire physical power and grid thesis to see how it holds up. Question number 1. Is the input scarce and non-substitutable?
It's a flawless yes. You cannot run an AI server cluster on virtual megawatts. You need physical electricity. And you cannot build the grid infrastructure without non-substitutable inputs like grain-oriented electrical steel and copper.
Question number 2. Is the supply slow or expensive to expand?
Another definitive yes. As we've detailed, we are looking at lead times of 2 to 4 years for transformers, 3 to 7 years for gas turbines, and 10+ years for new copper mines. This is the slowest moving supply curve in the entire global economy.
And question number 3. Does it capture a disproportionate share of the value chain?
Yes, because tech giants are facing a physical constraint on their growth. They are willing to pay massive premiums, whether that's 300% price increases on transformers or high-priced, long-term nuclear power PPAs, just to secure the right to plug in their chips. This means power and materials sit firmly at the very top of our duration ladder. They outlast chips, memory, and software because their supply side is the absolute hardest to expand.
To wrap up our discussion today, the physical power bottleneck shifts the entire AI narrative. It's no longer just about who is building the smartest algorithm or the fastest silicon. It is increasingly about who owns the capacity permit, the physical capability to actually run these systems.
It is a slow-motion, physical squeeze that is connecting the high-tech boardrooms of Silicon Valley to the copper mines of Chile and the nuclear reactors of Pennsylvania. It's the most durable rung on our bottleneck ladder, but it requires deep patience and respect for the cyclical, volatile nature of physical commodities.
In our next episode, we are going to explore the hidden choke points that sit right at the boundary between these silicon chips and the power grid, specifically advanced liquid cooling and high-density semiconductor packaging.
It's going to be an incredible deep dive, and we can't wait to share it with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to follow the AI money on the Working Thesis.
We'll see you next time. Okay, that's our episode. The honest goal here is simple. Hold a few ideas about the world and keep checking whether they're still true.
Together, out loud, a little at a time. If you spot where we've got it wrong, please tell us. That's how this gets better. See you next time.